All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to give everybody just a couple more minutes to maybe get in here, but I'll do a couple of introductions while we're waiting. My name is James Major, and I'm the National Rivers Project Coordinator for RMS. And we also have from RMS today with us, we have Becca Price, and she's our Communications Director, and Angie Furman, who's our River Training Center Coordinator, and Risa, who is the Executive Director. And we're all really happy that y'all could join us today. And we're gonna talk today as our River Management Roundtable is the African American Heritage Water Trail, Connecting Communities to Rivers. And we'll go ahead and go through some of the particulars. We have River Management Roundtables twice a month, and everybody's always invited. And we do on the river stuff, and we do workplace culture stuff. We go back and forth. So keep an eye out for those, and there'll be certainly all of them are interesting, and you're welcome to come to all of them. But there might be some that are more interesting to you. So just keep an eye out for those, so you can really bookmark the ones that you want to join us for topics that are really interesting to you. Today we have Laura Barghusen, who is the Blueways Director for Openlands, and Lillian Holden is Education and Outreach Coordinator for Openlands, and they're going to give us a presentation about the African American Heritage Water Trail, which is really cool. And before we get into any of that, we have the group norms and agreements for today's roundtable. We just want to make sure that everyone respects one another, to listen fully, seek understanding, allow others to be heard, and to acknowledge and respect differences and similarities. Speak for yourself and not for others. Keep your comments concise and relevant to the topic. Make connections to other ideas and thoughts, and to be fully present with us today. And we thank you for that. And we're really excited. I'm the National Rivers Project Coordinator, and National River Project is a website that connects people to river experiences through, we have 2,000 river segments, over around 15,000 access points, and over 700 campgrounds are associated with river access points and rivers themselves. And we were really excited to work with Openlands a few years ago. Laura worked with my predecessor, Jack Henderson, to get some of the data collected for the little Calumet River in Illinois. But I had not got to meet Laura and Lillian until this year, when Sigrid is one of our members and a great help in this area, connected us to get a talk going with Risa and Laura and Lillian and I, and we're really excited about working out and getting a river management roundtable focused on their project. And so they have a lot to tell us. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way and let them tell you all about the cool stuff that they're doing.
Thanks so much, James. I will see if I can share my screen here. All right, if everyone can see that, I will begin. As James said, I'm Laura Barghusen, Blueways Director at Openlands. And
Laura, we can't see your screen yet, I don't think.
Oh, should I try again?
Yeah, try again.
Okay, stop sharing and escape.
Said you were the presenter, but then we didn't see your screen. There we go.
And is it in presentation mode? Okay. So I'm Laura Barghusen, Blueways Director at Openlands, and I'm presenting today with Lillian Holden, our Education Outreach Coordinator at Openlands. And Openlands is a nonprofit that's located in Chicago, and that works in the northeastern Illinois region and also surrounding areas to preserve nature and open space and connect people to nature. Today we're going to discuss with you Openlands and Partners' work along the Little Calumet River to restore ecological health and connect communities and neighborhoods to the river. Our project, Biodiversity and Community in the Calumet, creates access and restores open spaces along the river. And in this slide, you can see our project area on the Little Calumet River. It appears in the red box near the bottom of the map. So the Little Calumet River is located near the southern border of Chicago, and it flows west towards the city of Blue Island. And it's a wide and deep channel that's been modified to accommodate barges and other industrial traffic. So the efforts that we're going to be discussing today actually began in 2018 with a participatory planning process that was led by the Forest Preserves of Cook County and the American Institute of Architects. And the goal was to better connect neighborhoods to Beaubien Woods. And the neighborhoods that we were working with, if you can see my cursor, they're the neighborhoods right here, and they include Atgeld Gardens, Golden Gate, and the Concordia Place Pangea Lakes neighborhood right here. And Beaubien Woods, which is owned by the Forest Preserves of Cook County, is right here. So it's just immediately east of those neighborhoods. And so although the river flows on the southern border of these neighborhoods, there's really almost no access to the river from the neighborhoods. And that was one of the things that we were working on. And we were also working on better connecting these neighborhoods to Beaubien Woods itself. So connections to the river and connections to Beaubien Woods. And the planning process involved community groups, nonprofits, and government entities. And the process really defined a number of objectives to achieve the goals of connection. Oh, wait, I think I have to do this to make all this appear. There we go. So some of these objectives were establishing public open space on land that was vacant along the river. And so that was like along here. So below the neighborhoods, not in the forest preserves, but land that could give residents of these neighborhoods access to the river. Creation of the African American Heritage Water Trail to uplift significant history and encourage pride and investment in the area. And then also the establishment of inviting trails and connections to both the river and to Beaubien Woods from the neighborhoods. So again, the strategies for connecting the neighborhoods to the river include the creation of the African American Heritage Water Trail, planning for creation of open spaces along the river, and creation of inviting connections to open spaces. And so these strategies were designed to create access to outdoor recreation, enhancing physical and psychological health, to celebrate local history, which is really nationally significant and can inspire community pride and focus positive attention and investment in the area. To create open spaces using ecological restoration to improve water quality, and really to promote equity through river access and improved water quality. The neighborhoods that we're working in have been really historically underserved neighborhoods, although they have really tons of assets that can be stressed and uplifted to encourage change. So the other thing about the area here is that the project area is really embedded within the much larger proposed Calumet National Heritage Area that spans the Calumet area of Illinois and Indiana, and that's currently awaiting congressional approval as a national heritage area. And so because of the significant history in our project area, the Little Calumet River, really, and riverfront really has the potential to be a destination in the emerging national heritage area, to be really like a key destination. So, in order to create the African American Heritage Water Trail in 2019 and 2020, Openlands and community partners worked to create a brochure and a story map that would basically define the trail. The stretch of the Little Calumet and banks between Beaubien Woods, which on this map is this green space right here, and the Village of Robbins, which on this map is the outlined village right here, has nationally significant history associated with it. And what you're seeing here, the brochure actually folds out with this map on one side. So this is actually the map side of the brochure. And on the other side are pictures and, writings basically about the history. Each little blue circle you see here is a site along the trail that you can read about either on the story map or on the other side of this map. So we wanted to create a trail that would highlight the stories and sites that were important to communities along the river in order to bring attention and resources to the neighborhoods adjacent to the river. And also to help attract people to the boat launch at Beaubien Woods, where the trail begins. So the water trail tells stories of the Underground Railroad, the birth of the environmental justice movement in Chicago and in the United States, and the Village of Robbins, where many Tuskegee Airmen began their training. And the water trail raises awareness of community assets, such as the local biking group We Keep You Rollin', and also the Robbins History Museum. So as we were discussing before, the water trail really exists in the context of the larger project that also creates access to the Little Calumet River for communities in partnership with them, including acquiring land as public open space, creating trails to the river, and greening the riverfront. This is a conceptual drawing created during the 2018 planning of what open space created by the river could offer to adjacent communities. So in order to create what we termed open space opportunity areas along the river, after the 2018 planning sessions, Openlands looked at ownership of vacant open space areas along the river that were owned by the Cook County Land Bank and the City of Chicago, or by the Chicago Department of Transportation or Commonwealth Edison as rights of way. And we aggregated land that seemed to be available either for acquisition or for agreement with the owners into 4 different potential open space areas that are labeled A through D on the map at the top of this slide. So this work included research on what areas really were available for acquisition, as well as planning with community and community groups in terms of what opportunity areas were actually of interest to them and how those should be developed as public open space. And so in terms of the areas that we defined, Area A here is one we dubbed the Community Riverfront Park. This is actually almost 4 acres, and it is immediately in the westernmost Concordia Place, Pangea Lakes neighborhood. This school right here, Du Bois School, is just a couple blocks north of it. And this neighborhood really needs parks. It's separated from parks over to the east by the active Union Pacific Rail line, which is right here. Um, and and it is, within walking distance of the school. All those things made it appealing. And in terms of doing planning for what that park might look like, we we did some surveying and conversations with people. I and the Dolores Lucas, who's the head of We Keep You Rollin', went into some of the schools to parent-child events to talk to parents about what they would like to see in riverfront open spaces. And one of those was at Du Bois School, which is the one near Space A. And then if you look below Space A, you can see a conceptual drawing where we tried to capture some of those ideas. You can see a trail, native flowering plants, benches where you could sit and look at the river. And there was also a desire for wildlife viewing areas. And the person in the background there who's looking at a sign that could, say be pictures of birds that you might see along the river with a little bit of information about them. And one of the big desires was actually play spaces for kids. And so it's kind of cut off at the left side. There could be like a little natural, nature-based play space there. And then people also wanted lighting to make the area safer. So this is kind of a conceptual drawing of what could happen at Space A. Space B is one that was identified by the local biking group as a place that would be great for them to have a storage container for bikes, to have a neighborhood meeting place. And so when you see the bike box in the lower right of the slide, that's sort of a concept for what could be developed there. Space C is immediately east of Chicago's finest marina, which is right here. And Chicago's finest marina is actually a stop or a site on the water trail. It's the only and oldest Black-owned marina in the city of Chicago that was established in the 1950s due to discrimination at other marinas. And so that space plus the space you see marked as C was all part of the historic Ton Farm, which was recently designated by the National Park Service's Network to Freedom program as a stop on the Underground Railroad. So that site has a lot of history on it. And Site C also, for about the past 40 to 50 years, has been informally farmed by community members. In the picture below, you can see the rows of lettuce that were there in 2019. And so establishing this as public open space would both protect that usage of a farming space for the community and also open up public access to the river, as well as a place to interpret the history of the area, along with the interpretation that's happening at Chicago's finest marina. And then Space D over on the easternmost side actually shares a border with Beaubien Woods and also shares a 18-acre wetland with Beaubien Woods. And so the idea there was, perhaps trails, wetland restoration in that space. So, and in terms of update, what's happening now is sites B and C are being purchased from the Cook County Land Bank by the city of Chicago and transferred to Neighbor Space, which is one of our partners, which is a land trust that owns land so that the community can program it. And so those two open spaces are now in the process of being formed. And A and D we're still working on. Let's see if I've said everything I meant to say on this slide. I think so. And I just want to show you here a picture of the, this is sort of detail of the past of Site C, the Ton Farm. This is a historic picture of the farmhouse. And none of the buildings associated with the Ton Farm, and this is the one that was the stop on the Underground Railroad, none of them are standing at this point. But through, interpretive signage and trails and the community farming, that, that history can be interpreted. And when we were in the schools and talking to people in the neighborhoods, it seems like the history of the neighborhoods and the Underground Railroad are both priorities for the community in terms of, learning about neighborhood history and having local interpretation. So you can see a little picture of us. We did some archaeology actually at the Ton Farm site back in 2019, where we just dug test pits. We didn't find any building foundations as we were hoping, but we did find some pottery shards that were pre-Civil War era. So that was kind of exciting. We actually just got the report from that. So Chicago's finest marina, which is owned by Ron Gaines, and he works with the Little Calumet River Underground Railroad Project, which has a Network to Freedom grant right now to develop interpretation and signage for the site. And so these are just like a couple weekends ago, we were down looking at the signs that are being developed and voting on them in different ways for what color schemes we liked. So pretty soon there's actually going to be, interpretive signage at the marina. And this is also the kind of thing that we can extend into the opportunity area as it comes to neighbor space. And this is just sort of concepts of Site C, which is the Ton Farm, and D, which was the expansion, the area right next to Beaubien Woods with the wetland on it. About possible uses of trails. On the left, you can see the picture of a We Keep You Rollin' event. That's the local bike group that, would very much be interested in expanded bike trails and walking trails as well, and views of the river and restored native flowering plant communities. And finally, I'm gonna finish my part of the presentation by basically returning to the boat ramp at Beaubien Woods. This is the beginning of the African American Heritage Water Trail. This is the western part of Beaubien Woods, and we are working with the Forest Preserves of Cook County and the Field Museum and community members to do prairie restoration at the boat ramp, and we will also anticipate doing native plant restoration in those 4 opportunity areas as we gain access to them. And now we are working at Beaubien Woods itself to do plantings of native prairie plants in what's basically now kind of like old field habitat. And with the goal really of increasing biodiversity, making the area more inviting for the community and other visitors, and also infiltrating stormwater to a greater extent to help increase the quality of the Little Calumet River. After creating the brochure and story map for the African American Heritage Water Trail, we did realize that there was actually a lot of demand for tours on the trail. And last summer, we started a pilot to train local youth and to pay local youth to learn how to interpret the trail in hopes of moving towards, really having a core of people who can interpret the trail and have that be, um, you know, a job development opportunity for them. And Lillian is now going to talk about our pilot last summer in training the local youth. So at this point, I will hand this over to Lillian.
All right. Yeah. So as Laura said, our youth internship is kind of like that, the cherry on top of the work that we've been doing. It's that added layer to really celebrate local history, to create equitable access to the river, and then to um, inspire more economic empowerment through employment, youth employment specifically. And so the youth internship is a program where that was developed in a bit of a scaffolding, with a scaffolding approach to it. So we started out in June, and then and then we ended in July. So it covered about 5 days, and we wanted the youth to learn how to canoe and how to interpret components of the African American Heritage Water Trail, those histories, the sites, and the figures. And so with the canoeing, we started out at Flatfoot Lake, and in which the youth were learning about the themes of the African American Heritage Water Trail. Then we canoe within the Little Calumet River, and then there was a leadership program at Jackson Park Harbor, and more canoeing along the Little Calumet River, and then ending out with a public event. So that is our ending piece, the culminating piece of the whole internship is for the youth to take everything that they learn and to present it in a way that they feel is the most enriching for them. So and yeah, so next slide. And so as I mentioned, the youth internship, it included youth. So in total, we had 11 youth, ranging from high school age to young adult. And they were recruited and paid by the Friends of the Forest Reserves in St. Sabina. And so Friends of the Forest Reserve, some of us may know, is an extension of the Forest Reserves, Cook County, and then also St. Sabina. And for those who aren't familiar with St. Sabina is a local church that is known for social programming, and it's within Chicago, the south side of Chicago. And so we're looking at this and kind of like it's all one piece, but also looking at the two separate parts of the internship, that canoe and kayaking part, and then that historical interpretation part. And so the canoe and kayaking component, youth were taught just basics of how to canoe, how to kayak, and how to make others more safe in boats when they're out guiding individuals, participants along the river, and then also learning rescue training. So what to do if in the case that a canoe flips over, how to save somebody, which is really important, especially along the Little Calumet River, since it is the body of water is higher than some of the other canoeing sites on the southeast side, and there's a lot of traffic and barges that come through it. And then with our historical interpretation training, led by Openlands and St. Sabina, it's the youth learned how to they learned about the African American Heritage Water Trail through a series of interactive activities and games and trivia and bingo and homework and etc. And they also learned how to be better public speakers. And so, yeah, next slide. And so when constructing our youth internship, we really leaned on a few learning practices. So total participation techniques. One of those is and with total participation techniques is finding it's looking at activities that includes all of the youth, and that involves different styles of learning within that one activity. So one of our activities is where we, using our brochure, our African American Heritage Water Trail brochure, we laminated the brochure, cut it up into pieces, and then the youth would then, based off of a theme that they selected out of a hat, so kind of like a randomized theme, they will have to put together, they would have to find the pieces of the brochure that applies to the theme without any prior context. So using kind of like um, uh, using some context clues and also using inferencing, and then also rewards based learning. So we had activities where, for example, we had a bingo activity. Oh no, let me roll back. So for example, we had a trivia activity in which the youth were we had questions, and we'll be showing some images of these activities for you to have a visual representation. But with our trivia, we had them on key cards, and then the youth will run to a local tree, and whoever gets to the tree first would have opportunity to answer one of the trivia questions. And if they get it correct, then they win maybe a gift card. And if they get it wrong, then they have to run to the next tree, and then it kind of starts over again until they get it correct. And so that's where we're using kind of rewards to incentivize them for really retaining the information. And so kinesthetic learning, again, that movement, so playing games, like the game I'm talking about, and then reading and learning. And so reading and learning, we incorporated when we weren't with them, we created packets for the youth, and in those packets there were different readings that relate to our sites and figures that so they can brush up on their knowledge about those different sites and figures. So when we have our grand event, they're the experts in the room, and they know in depth what they are talking about. And so readings about Major Taylor, who is he's a world-renowned cyclist from the 1890s. Readings about Hazel Johnson. She birthed the environmental movement in Chicago, and also readings about the Tuskegee Airmen in relation to the Robbins Airport and the Village of Robbins. And so our approach to the learning was very multifaceted and incorporating as many different learning styles as possible, because we have such a diverse group of youth and with different styles of retaining information. And so these are just our themes. So as Laura mentioned earlier, the African American Heritage Water Trail covers at least 180 years worth of history. And we have about 29 sites and figures identified along the African American Heritage Water Trail that feeds into these 7 themes. That's the Underground Railroad, talking about the youth were given an opportunity to learn about the Tom Farm, and the Daltons, the Tom Farm, they're a Dutch immigrant family who helped house freedom seekers. And then you have the Daltons, who were an abolitionist family who had a local ferry, which also used to help freedom seekers continue to go further up north. And then the Civil Rights Movement, learning about, I mentioned Major Taylor, learning about Chicago Finest Marina. Laura mentioned that a little bit earlier, one of the first and only Black-owned marinas in Chicago. And then learning about Bishop Henry Louis Ford, who is a prominent figure in the community and who also spoke at Emmett Till's funeral. And so then the birth of the EJ movement, Hazel Johnson, the neighborhoods, which are very critical parts of these conversations, because a lot of, when you think about some of the effects of the environmental justice, the effects of who were most affected by the lack of environmental justice within the community area, those are the neighborhoods. And so learning about who was affected, learning about the genesis of the neighborhoods and how they started off. And then the Village of Robbins, that connection to the Tuskegee Airmen and how there were um, uh, um, and how individuals fought for a seat at the table. And so, yeah, next slide. And so this is an image of us, the youth paddling within uh, Whistler Woods. Next slide. And then this is our brochure, puzzles activity. And so there's an image of one of, so the image right in the center between the second image is the Challenger Aero Club. And that is, they were founded in 1935 by Robinson, and he's in the center. If you could see the images, he's in the center. And he was, and then you have Willa Brown also, who was the first African American woman to earn a pilot's license. And so, the youth had to put these, review these different sites and figures, and then make sense of it, and then see if it is relevant to the theme that they selected. Next slide. And so we also wanted them to get a sense of a timeline of these things. So so with that, the interns learned about how learn to well, using the theme that they had selected, or they would put the theme to the accurate timeline, just to learn exactly around what era some of these historical events had happened. And then I mentioned the readings and writings as part of our learning methodology. So that is an image of some of our readings that we found through online resources. And just to serve as a virtual component, we also included Google Classroom. And so Google Classroom served as a hub for videos and the videos that are on YouTube about the Tuskegee Airmen or about Hazel Johnson. Also, podcast about a specific parts of the African American Heritage Water Trail that could help them better understand in depth what happened at the time. So we just use that to hold items that aren't paper related and to help them further research. And so this is an example of our trivia. And so the trivia included true and false questions, but also questions that highlighted time frames and specific accolades that can be associated with either the neighborhoods or associated with some of our figures like Hazel Johnson. And so those were really well received by the youth, and the way we played it made it even more just a fun activity. And then we also played bingo, classic bingo, but just applying it to the sites and figures of the African American Heritage Water Trail. Another really well received game. And then here's just an image of our bingo close up. So you can see that there's some pennies next to our dates, and then you'll see that there's different sites and figures. Barack Obama mentioned because Hazel Johnson was a mentor to Barack Obama. And yeah. And so so we're going to go through a series of images, and these images are of our youth from our last day, our July 23rd grand event. We were unfortunately rained out. However, instead of going within the water, we decided to go to the youth agreed on hosting a walking tour for our participants. And so they each picked a theme, and they each talked about that theme and as the final event. So you'll see Marianne, and then that's Kira, and then next slide, and then just the everything in action. This is like the youth in action. Next slide. And then it may be hard to make this out, but I included this because I thought it was very heartwarming. So one of the youth, Amarian, reached out to me, and he says, "Hi Lillian, it's Amarian Coleman from France of the Forest Reserve. I wanted to say thank you for everything that you've done for me throughout the program. Without you and Miss Erica and Laura, I wouldn't be as much of a confident speaker as I am today. So thank you for that. Enjoy the rest of your summer." And this is just a testimony of the impact that the youth program had on our that the internship had on our youth. And then all of the, and then this is everyone in one place, and just so you all can see who was all involved. And so thank you so much for your time. And we're here to answer any questions or concerns, or just to answer any questions that you may have, or if you wanted to reach out individually about specific components of our project, you can reach out to either me or Laura through these emails. And I'm just gonna stop talking and see if there's any questions.
And we have about 15 minutes. So if anyone wants to comment, ask questions, discuss, we got plenty of time. So please unmute yourself or add questions to the chat.
Hey there, this is Ben. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York. I'm actually working on a similar project in Newburgh, New York, along the Hudson. And one of the questions I had was about land acquisition and easements for the project. So could you just talk a little bit more about how you got the city of Chicago to agree to acquire the land? Was there funding involved? And how did you get them to agree to pass it along to the land trusts?
Yeah. So we were kind of in conversation. Openlands, works with the city of Chicago in several different capacities in terms of, what we do. And so we basically were in conversations with the chief sustainability officer to the mayor. And I think what was kind of a breakthrough is that this project, the kind of larger project that I was talking about at the beginning, really has a lot of different partners. And at a certain point, I think it was Friends of the Chicago River and the Illinois Environmental Council who decided to host what they were calling, I think, a lawmakers event at Beaubien Woods to invite, lawmakers and politicians and city staff to Beaubien Woods to listen to a variety of speakers, about community desires for the neighborhoods and the work that different groups were doing at Beaubien Woods and in the neighborhoods and the neighborhood desires for Beaubien Woods. And so it was like this event where, several community groups spoke, including People for Community Recovery, which is the group that Hazel Johnson, who's basically considered, the mother of environmental justice in Chicago and also part of the National Environmental Justice Movement. She founded that organization, which is now run by her daughter. Her daughter spoke at the, at this lawmakers event. And I think that the city of Chicago was really, interested in doing something after that event and probably before as well. And we had been speaking to them before that event about the whole vision that came out of that 2018 planning process. Anyway, they decided to include actually $1.5 million in their budget. So they included that in the budget not last month, but the October before, to do some of the work associated with the vision. And so that is where the money is coming from to purchase the land and do work on the land, um, on those open space opportunity areas. And it's kind of going step by step because these areas maybe, they may have contamination that needs to be mitigated. And so right now they're working on 2 opportunity areas. And once the environmental studies are done, and we have a sense of how much, if any, remediation is needed, then we can see, what else can be done. But the city seems really excited about it, and about the history of the, the Underground Railroad history and other history, the environmental justice movement. I'm probably talking too much, but that's kind of how it happened in conversations and through that event, I think. And then
That's,
through them including it in their budget.
that's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good luck on your project then. So I have a question, Laura. How many, I don't even know the best way to ask the question. Is there a lot of traffic? Are there many people who will experience the African American Heritage Water Trail by saying, I'm going to go visit these places, I'm going to do it through the water, and they paddle that section just for that purpose, as opposed to through paddling people who are just on their little Calumet and want to go out for a day? How would you describe like that traffic or that amount of visitorship that you think is tied towards that specific interest, if you can count it?
Yeah, I think when we host events, where somebody has brought boats and where there's an interpreter or several interpreters, and then when that gets advertised, we actually get a lot of response. For example, when the interns did their final event before we knew that it was rained out, we had like about 100 people try to register for about 30 spots in canoes. People were very interested under that kind of circumstance. Um, in terms of, people bringing their own boats and doing it on their own, I don't know how much of that is going on at this point. I think, probably considerably less. This area of Chicago, in terms of people who live close, I don't think there's much boat ownership and there's no boat rental. Um, so, and in terms of people who live farther away, I personally, at least in the past, have heard people, express reservations about going down to this area with their boats. So I think there's kind of a perception that the area, might be too dangerous, which we're hoping, will change as these changes happen, in terms of, really things to see there. And as you get more people at the boat ramp, and in these open space areas. Um, so yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's what you've done is the first of its kind. It's so different and so like ahead of the curve in the world of water trails, why people do water trails or what are significant components of it. It's usually access and fishing or being able to skip rocks or boating. Um, so adding this core cultural component is plus all the unbelievable stories that you've just shared with us are just amazing. So I'm not surprised there aren't that many because it's so different, than others if you just look around like the country or the area.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
also more behind in terms of our timeline because COVID, we finished the brochure in 2020 and then proceeded to not really do any events um, until late in the summer 2021.
Mm-hmm.
also to add to Laura's point about the reservations, about individual like boating and canoeing along the Little Calumet River, is the African American Heritage Water Trail starts from Beaubien Woods to the Village of Robbins, and then that'll be almost 12 to the end of it is like Owl Slip actually. So Owl Slip, that'd be like about 12 miles in total canoeing. And the Village of Robbins doesn't have a launch or a resting point. And so there is this need for just more launch sites and resting points in between, as well as a need to identify those space, like identify like exactly the flow of the water that's friendly uh, for experiences. Is with all those barges and with the water being as high as it is suggested that experienced canoe and kayakers go along it rather than um, novice. And so, yeah, that was something that I found to be interesting, especially learning more about it. That there isn't a resting spot, and you need to rest in between. So, how can we get a spot at Beaubien Woods? No, sorry, at the Village of Robbins.
You need a brewery there, right? Place where people want to come and visit. Wow, thank you. Any other questions for the nuts and bolts for Laura, the programming for Lillian?
I have a question myself. If if the person who asked me about the land acquisition, who is doing a similar project, is still on, if he could say a little bit more about his project.
Yeah, sure. So I'm working as part of a team. This is along the Hudson River, about 2 hour train ride north of the city, and we are working on a feasibility study for a greenway that would go along the Quasaic Creek, which is a creek that is the border between the city of Newburgh and the town of New Windsor. So we're looking at about a 2 mile stretch that stretches from the Hudson River on the east to an inland lake called Crystal Lake on the west. So right now, we have done a lot of robust community engagement. Just a little bit about the city of Newburgh. It is a remarkable city. It has an incredible amount of artistic creativity. It's also suffered from some disinvestment and sort of deindustrialization. It's a majority people of color city within a largely white county, and for that reason has been sort of an outlier in some of the planning processes that have happened. So we're really looking at the creek as a way to bring different communities together. And I've been assisting with a lot of the research around implementation, everything from acquisition to governance and management of the greenway and programming as well. So this has been a great case study to learn from. So thank you so much. And I'll send you an email afterwards as well if we want to keep talking and maybe sharing notes.
That sounds great. Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like a really cool project.
Well, James, we have a couple other slides that we can kind of go to. So for folks who are still here, thanks again for joining us. We'll, like Becca mentioned at the outset, we'll post a recording of this along with many over 70 recordings of river management roundtables that we have hosted during the last couple of years, and webinars and training workshops that Angie has hosted with the River Training Center. And you're welcome to go there anytime you'd like. So, and we'll announce it once we're posted. We'll have a bunch of river management roundtables beginning in January. We think we're going to give everyone a little bit of a break in December. And then we're looking forward to hosting the River Management Symposium, which we do every other year. We'll be in San Antonio, in sunny San Antonio, we hope, at the end of February. And if you just go to our website, you can learn about that. The theme is access, both from an economic standpoint, so like a business economic development standpoint, a diversity, equity standpoint, and a social standpoint. As we all know, rivers are becoming more and more important to all of us. So next slide, we have some other training events. You can see what's going on at our website. And then one more thing, we have a survey that we would love for you to take. I think that's on, yeah, there we go. If you could just click on that and you can tell us what you thought of today's session. We would really appreciate your feedback because that's how we roll and envision our future programming. So any other questions? Again, please reach out anytime. There's Laura and Lillian's email address, but we'll also send as a follow-up a list of resources. I think Laura has a treasure trove of links, documents, a really cool video, and articles that have been produced to share the awesomeness of this water trail. So we'll send that out with when we posted the videos, also the recording today. Any other questions before we call it a day? We'll stay here for another couple minutes if you'd like, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Lillian. Thank you, Laura, so much for your great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks.